My best friend Jim and I had a great knack for traveling in our college days. We often went hiking or camping whenever we got the time. This incident happened when we went to Nebraska for a short trip. We needed a place for one night before heading to my aunt's house. We didn't want to spend much, so Jim initiated the idea of booking a cheap Motel 6. We got some pretty good deals and found a budget motel. We booked 2 separate rooms with single beds. The day before the arrival, I called the motel owner to confirm our reservation. In return, I got an unpleasant surprise. The owner told me that he accidentally double booked a single room, and now that there were no more rooms available. I got very angry, but Jim and I decided to manage as it was a matter of one night. After driving for hours, when we finally reached the motel, I realized what a huge mistake we had made. The motel looked nothing like the pictures on the site. It was out of maintenance for a long time. The walls were rusty and old, filled with spots. The rooms were barely hanging, it seemed. We walked to the counter, and a skinny woman in her mid-50s stood there. "Welcome, sir, welcome. I called you yesterday, and you said you have double booked the same room." "Oh yes, I remember. We are extremely sorry. But we also have another room which is a double bed if you want. I can shift you there. We won't be charging you extra." Jim and I exchanged looks, and we thought it'd be better to sleep in a big bed than sleeping on the floor. The woman took a rusty big key and told us to follow her. She was walking so slowly that Jim and I almost bumped into her while trying to walk past. My eyes were on the rooms, and I realized this motel is a den for drug addicts and antisocials. I could smell a strong odor of illegal substances in the air of the motel. "Here, this is your room, sir." We stopped in front of a white door, and it had no number. Jim said in a confused voice, "Why doesn't it have a room number?" "Well, we just finished the maintenance work here, so the numbers haven't been assigned yet." As we entered the room, we were surprised. The room was way different from the others. It was extremely clean, and I could smell the bleach. A white, comfy bed stood in the middle of the room. There was a big mirror in the corner. A set of 2 chairs paired with a wooden table resided next to the window. There was a big lamp near the bed. The woman handed me the keys and left. Jim closed the door and said, "Thank God we got this room. Otherwise, you would have to sleep on the floor." Shut up. I went to the window and peeked behind the curtains. Jim looked at me with curious eyes and said, "What? What is it?" "I have a bad feeling about this place, man." "Yeah, didn't you smell the pot in the air? This place is crowded with druggies." "No, that's not what's bothering me." "Then what is it?" "I'm talking about this room. They didn't tell us about this room before, and now all of a sudden, they assigned this under the same rate. Also, look how extremely clean it is, considering the other rooms." Jim opened a beer can and threw himself on the bed, saying, "You're probably the first man on earth who was complaining about this motel room being too clean." I felt the mocking undertone and got quiet to avoid any more leg pulling. But like a sore tooth, this uncanny feeling of being in this room kept hammering me. I unpacked my bags and went to take a shower. The bathroom had 100 times more chemical smell than the room. I turned on the tap to fill the bathtub, but instead of water, a weird gurgling sound came out. I closed the tap and turned it on again, but this time, splashing a massive chunk of black hair, dirty, clogged water came out of the tap. "What the hell? What now?" I pointed to the bathtub. The clogged water had a foul smell, which choked my nostrils right away. Both of us decided not to use the bathroom anymore. I could barely eat that night after seeing those long strands of black hair coming out of the tap. I changed my clothes and went to bed. Jim was a heavy sleeper, and he snored a lot. But I was tired too, So, in spite of the car racing sounds coming out of his nose, I fell asleep. I don't exactly remember the time, but I woke up hearing the tap water running in the bathroom. I recalled turning it off before going to bed. Jim, did you keep the tap running again? Jim didn't say anything, only snored in reply. I realized I had to turn it off. I got out of the covers and walked to the bathroom, rubbing my sleepy eyes. As I stepped inside the dark bathroom, I saw the curtain surrounding the bathtub was also closed. A weird breathing sound was coming from the other side. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a shadowy figure sitting in the bathtub. Being completely shocked, I moved the curtain in one go, and there was no one. The bathtub was filled with black, murky water that smelled like death. I closed the tap and was about to turn back when bubbles formed on the water. Slowly, the murky water started to form bubbles in a very unnatural way. This went on for a few seconds, then everything got pin-drop silent. Like the air stopped blowing, the clock stopped ticking, even the bubbles stopped making the sound. An unknown fear grabbed my feet and glued them to the cold bathroom floor. Suddenly, that heavy breathing took place again, and the still black water started to move. I stood like a statue and watched all this happen with my own eyes. The next few minutes were probably the scariest times of my life. Suddenly, a human head started to surface from the bathtub. It was a woman's head, no doubt, as I could see her long black hair dangling. A chunk of hair was missing from her head, resulting in a bald spot. Her face was completely covered, and she was making a spine-chilling sound from her closed mouth. It was a mix of a subdued growl and a painful moan. The blood in my veins froze in fear, and sweat appeared on my forehead. The woman rose from the murky water, but didn't step outside the bathtub. She then pointed to the ceiling, and I saw her rotting hands for the first time. Her skin was so filthy that some of her fingernails were peeling off. Is this real? I said with incredible difficulty. The woman, again, didn't say anything, just pointed to the ceiling. She then parted her hair with her rotted hands, and I saw her face. I don't think anyone can even imagine such a face. Her skin looked slimy, like a frog. The scariest part of her face was her eyes. Her eyes were sewn closed with a black thread. She then slowly smiled at me, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. Crawling like a coward dog, I came out of the bathroom. Jim woke up hearing my scream and got even more shocked seeing me crouching on the floor, drenched in sweat. What happened? Why did you scream? I don't want to stay here anymore. We have to leave now. But why? Is everything all right? No! Take your stuff and meet me at the car. I grabbed my bag and rushed to my car, barefooted. Jim followed me. We didn't bother to inform the woman who let us in. Jim kept asking me so many questions, but I just drove down the highway. All I wanted was to get away from this messed up motel. At 6 a.m, when I reached my aunt's house, she got shocked seeing us at the doorstep. After some hours, when I finally calmed myself down, I told them everything I saw there. Jim said it was all a bad dream, but I knew how real it all felt. We complained to the Motel 6 website. Everyone expected the matter to end there, but 3 months after our incident, a horrifying incident came out of the news. Like us, many other boarders complained about this sketchy motel, and some even went to the cops saying that they saw a dead girl in one of their rooms. The cops searched the property, and the truth unfolded. They found a dead body of a girl floating in the motel water reservoir located on its roof. This woman, named Riley, came with her boyfriend Max to this motel to fool around. But her boyfriend murdered her in that same room where we stayed. Getting freaked out after realizing what he had done, Max bribed the hotel owner to help him disappear her body. For a certain amount of cash, the owner and Riley's boyfriend dumped her body inside the water tank and then cleared the room to remove all evidence. That's why the strong smell of bleach kept roaming in the air of the room. When my aunt and Jim saw the news, they couldn't speak for a while. I still get nightmares of that girl pointing at the ceiling while standing in the bathtub, smelling like death. In my nearly 3 decades of experience in building maintenance, repair, and renovation, I've never worked at a place as unusual as the local Motel 6. Now, the other peculiar thing about the Motel 6 you wouldn't know unless you worked there, management was terrified of the lights ever going out. We had 2 backup generators on site. Our generator was diesel, the other some fancy solar thing. Given how remote the motel was in location, I could understand having a good backup, but 2 generators was excessive. The manager, a fussy middle-aged guy named Owen, insisted that maintenance check and swap out all the light bulbs on the property each month. I never made the connection between Owen's obsession with the lights and generators with Motel 6's official slogan until the night of our first true blackout. If you're unfamiliar with Motel 6's advertising, they have a very famous tagline they use in all their commercials. "We'll leave the lights on for you." It all started with a week of nasty storms we got last year. This was back in January, so we didn't have a ton of guests. I think at the time of the incident, maybe 20 rooms were occupied, or maybe 30. We'd gotten 8 days straight of rain first, then slush, then snow. Owen was worried that the wind might knock the lines down and we'd be stuck. All of the cloud cover meant the solar generator would be useless, so the boss sent Mikey to make sure the diesel cans were full in case we needed the other power source. Sure enough, on the 9th night of the crappy weather, the lights began to flicker. "We need the generator up and running, Logan, now," Owen demanded, running into my office. I sighed and picked up my radio from the desk. "Hey, Mikey, I got Owen here with me. Looks like the snow might knock out our..." As if on cue, the lights flickered again and came back much dimmer. "Shoot, yeah, I think we're about to lose electricity. Can you go ahead and fire up the diesel so we can keep the lights on?" We might have a problem there, boss," Mikey said. All of the blood drained from Owen's face at Mikey's reply. "Can you meet me in the generator room?" We left the office and hurried through the parking lot. It was snowing hard, and Owen nearly slipped on some hidden ice, grabbing for my arm to keep from falling. We crossed over to the small maintenance building and hurried inside. Mikey was already sitting on the diesel generator when we walked to the small back room. He had a sheepish grin that was more of a wince than anything. Now I'll tell you the issue with the generator," Mikey promised, holding up his hands. "But first you have to promise not to be mad." Before I could reply, the lights flickered a 3rd time and went black. Owen screamed from somewhere behind me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my flashlight. Mikey did the same. "We need to get the lights back on," Owen shouted. I made my way over to one of the shelves in the room and rummaged around for a moment, then pulled out a few emergency lanterns I knew we had in storage. Once those were active, the back room was bright and almost cozy. Even with the return of the light, Owen didn't look relieved. "We have to hurry," he told me, clutching a lantern to his chest. "We only have a few minutes before it's too late for the guests." Owen turned to Mikey. "What is wrong with the generator?" So, here's the thing," Mikey replied, looking down at his feet. "The generator is fine, but we're out of diesel. I've been borrowing the fuel from my truck and replacing it with water." "You idiot! You absolute moron!" Owen spat at Mikey. "There's no fuel? The guests have been in the dark now for, he checked his watch, more than 3 minutes. Complete. Total dark. Do you get it? They could start turning any... Owen was interrupted by the most savage scream I have ever heard coming from inside the Motel 6. The three of us looked at each other. Then Owen sprinted for the door to the maintenance room. Owen locked and bolted the door, then began trying to push a table against it as a barricade. "Help me before they realize we're here," Owen hissed. Mikey and I moved to help him push furniture in front of the door. There was another shriek from the motel, then another, then what almost sounded like howling. "They'll start with each other," Owen whispered. "Once some of them get into the parking lot, they'll try the door. We need to stay quiet." "What is going on?" I asked. The decision was made for us when I took out my phone. We didn't have great reception at the motel, even in clear weather, but the constant snowstorms had completely killed the signal. "We should make a run for our cars," Mikey suggested. It was cold in the maintenance building and getting colder every minute. I wasn't eager to go outside, but I knew Mikey was right. Owen protested as we cleared the barricade. The three of us sat in a circle as Owen spilled his guts. All Motel 6s have a terrible design flaw, or maybe a curse, or an intentional defect created to experiment on people. Everything was safe as long as the lights were on in or around the building. But if the motel ever experienced true darkness for just a few minutes, it would begin to alter the minds of all inside. The effects, I'm told, are rapid and extreme, Owen explained, occasionally glancing over his shoulder at the door. "Think of it like a form of rabies." "That honestly sounds like a campfire story used to scare folks," I said. "I don't believe it." The three of us began to argue in whispers, still sitting in our little ring around some lanterns. Mikey and I wanted to call the police immediately. Owen begged us not to. He figured the damage was already done, and if we got the cops involved, it could cause terrible press for the Motel 6. He followed along with us when we crept out the door into the parking lot. I did see him tuck a hammer into his belt before we left. We waded through the snow in a single file line. We were nearly to my truck when we heard the scream. All three of us turned and froze at the same time. There was a young woman standing under a streetlight, staring at us. She was only wearing a nightgown, despite the wind and snow. Her face looked dazed, eyes blank, head tilted strangely. When she noticed us watching, the woman growled and began to sprint towards us. "She'll kill us all," Owen yelped, pushing Mikey down and making a run for it. That was a mistake. The woman jerked her head towards Owen and began to chase him through the snow. I have to admit that the manager's story felt very real at that moment. There was something deeply wrong with the guest, the way she ran barefoot in the snow. "Behind us," Mikey said, pointing towards the motel. It was hard to see with the snow, but I could just make out a few shadows on the other side of the parking lot moving towards us. "Run!" I hissed. We lost sight of Owen as we made a beeline for my truck. Maybe the other guests didn't notice us or simply didn't care. Once we were in my truck in one piece, I locked the doors and took a breath. "We gotta go back for Owen," I said. "Do we though?" Mikey asked. I pulled out my phone and was surprised to see I had a weak signal. "Call 911, I said, tossing Mikey the phone. "I'm going back for the boss." I didn't have to go far after leaving my truck to find Owen. He was standing in front of the entrance to the Motel 6, holding his hammer and panting. There was a crumbled body at his feet, wearing a blood-stained nightgown. It was the guest from earlier. "She was going to kill me," Owen whispered, clutching his bloody hammer. I had no choice. The woman was small and looked fragile in the snow. She didn't seem too dangerous. I didn't have a choice, Owen repeated, sounding less confident. I was in danger, right? I walked Owen back to my truck. The police and the fire department both arrived within the next 10 minutes. After one look at the blood-splattered Owen, they let him off while taking statements from Mikey and me. I was sitting in an interrogation room at the police station when they told me what happened. There was no Motel 6 curse, no danger in the dark. It was the storm. It knocked out more than the electricity. It also caused a gas leak. That was all it was, gas. It caused the guests to become delusional and confused. They weren't dangerous, only lost and needing help. I still have nightmares about Owen standing above the body of the girl in the snow. To this day, the gas that caused this was still being investigated.